Welcome everyone to today's Praxist Table Talk. My name is Vincent. I'm the founder of Praxia, and I have with me today a member of our leadership council, Cody. How are you?
Hello everyone, I'm doing well again.
That's good to hear. So today we're going to be touching upon a topic that is closely related to and is kind of an off-branch of the topics we've previously covered of love and of masculinity and femininity. And today what we're really concerned with is the romantic sphere and the interaction between men and women romantically in what would be this Kali Yuga that we live in today, this hyper-materialistic, hyper-sexualized society in which it is very hard to navigate if you're a single individual of either gender. So what we're going to do here is try to observe the topic from an objective perspective, coming from this, praxis understanding of reality in sort of a timeless, principled sense. So we have a few different perspectives to present, and we're going to try to understand how and why each party observes the situation in the way that they do. Perhaps come up with the right way to go about traversing this topic in this era, if there is a right way to go about it. But I figure as an introduction, I would describe a joke I heard, which, is there anything more characteristic of me than to describe a joke? But anyways, I'll describe a joke I heard from
True.
Yeah, right. But anyways, I'll describe a joke I heard from a video which kind of sets up the situation as a whole. So, at Comic-Con, they held a speed dating event, and the idea was that, nerds or geeks or whatever word you would like to use to describe the folks who like, movies and superheroes and video games and comic books and such, they don't have a place to go out. If you like music and drinking, you'd go to a bar. If you like sports, you'd go to a game or join a team. You might meet someone there and so on. But if you're a nerd, where do you go? So they set up this speed dating event at Comic-Con, and at the beginning of the event, they went into the room, about 30 guys and 30 girls. And on one side of the room, they lined up the guys, and on the other side of the room, they lined up the girls, and the announcer said, "Gentlemen, if you came here just to get laid tonight, you can leave now. Ladies, if you came here just to get laid tonight, take your pick." And obviously the joke is funny. What we're really getting at today is why that joke is funny. So we have a few different topics we've researched, a few different sources to pull from, but I think it's going to be an interesting episode. So, Cody, do you have an introduction?
Absolutely. And just before I get to the intro, I do want to correct you a little bit, just to make sure we use the proper vocabulary, because we don't want to use dysgenic words like gender, a whole origin around that with John Money and whatnot. So I prefer to very strictly, no crossing that line and using sex instead, because of all the other implications and conceded ground with more degenerate and devolutionary type of ideologies revolving around gender.
That's true.
But to introduce the topic, and we did promise that we were going to expand upon this more, like Vincent mentioned in the love and in the masculinity and femininity episodes respectively, that this is something specific to which needs a more in-depth look.
Yeah, definitely.
To start, though, we've created technologies that are not fully understood in impact. And we've been gifted or cursed with technology from greater minds that we take for granted and we use flippantly, disregarding consequence. Guns, cars, computers, even pens and paper are used by people who have no idea how to create them themselves and didn't have any bar of entry to use them, in most cases, until they earned it, through some show of competence or otherwise. Now, apply that to dating apps or pornography and every other stratum of sexuality that's being interfaced with online. This is where the problem of incels and e-whores begins.
Makes sense.
So, what do we mean by all of that anyways? What is an incel? What is an e-whore? And I will say, with this episode in particular, things might be a little more explicit or obscene just because of the content matter we are dealing with. So there's terminology that's just the colloquial terms for them that are used. And there's some scenarios that have to be described in a bit more peasantry type of vernacular, if you would. So, sorry in advance if
Yeah.
we can't maintain that highbrow attitude we've kept with most episodes.
Yeah, definitely. The topics at hand are really they're really into the down and dirty of society, especially one such as this one that does have to deal with these issues, such as hypersexuality and whatnot. So definitely the terminology used is just like the cultural terms that these things that have no dictionary definition have been come to be known by, things like
it's the Urban Dictionary.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, the Urban Dictionary. But
So to begin though,
yeah,
what would you say is the definition for these two sexual extremes for men and women in the most part, the incel and the e-whore?
okay, I guess on the side of the man, for the incel, definitely you would be able to describe it as a person who, well, I guess as the name suggests, it says involuntarily celibate, right? And that's definitely thrown around a lot without understanding, what the term actually means. But the type of person that falls into this category is definitely not the kind of person you would see in normal spheres. It's generally this very degenerative, almost borderline misogynistic individual that is that blames a lot of his problems on the world and doesn't necessarily take sexual accountability for himself. It would be someone who thinks that he is owed something romantically that he is unable to attain, likely because he does not put enough work into himself to be desirable in any sense, and likely he does not have a personality that is desirable as well. So he's very conceited, and the form does not match the essence, if you will. And then for the other sexual extreme, that would be, for e-whore, as they would put it. Definitely, it would be someone who is like a woman who is online. Generally, like the OnlyFans, the TikTok, the whole shebang. Very very conceited, but with low self-esteem. Generally speaking, and it's usually for attention.
Are you quoting negative XP there? Sorry to interrupt.
I am.
I was asking if you were quoting negative XP.
Oh no, I just that came off the top of my head.
Oh, okay, sorry. I'll get into that in a second then. My bad.
Oh no, okay. Interesting. But yeah, how did I put it? Did I say conceited and not conceited with low self-esteem?
Conceited with no self-esteem.
Yeah. That is kind of how it turns out to be in such cases. But generally the sexual method is just a means to an end for them. And the end is not necessarily just monetary, but they do make quite a bit of money off of it. But it really is, in the end, getting that boost of dopamine, the same boost of dopamine that men would get from pornography, in most cases. So it's
there's more money than you realize in this. I have a few examples.
Definitely. I'm saying that the ends necessarily don't begin with the money, while they may have financial benefits to them. I don't think that's the primary.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Anyways, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Like I said, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but the conceited with low self-esteem, as you put, is the actual lyrics from the song that went viral around 2019 from a band called Negative XP. And it's pretty much been washed offline because of the virality of it. And it's more or less right-wing implications in the song. And it's called Scott Pilgrim vs. the World Ruined a Whole Generation of Girls. Very, very funny song if you can find it. It's still lingering about. It's just a little harder to find.
Okay.
Yeah, it's essentially describing this dysgenic, degenerate type of online woman who dyes her hair and is conceited with low self-esteem, as the song states exactly. And I just thought that it was very funny that you used that phrasing to describe this is what they used in their song.
The song sounds vaguely
so if anyone
familiar,
hasn't
so
heard it yet,
maybe
it like I said, it went super viral in around 2019 because so many people saw the truth in it. And the band is pretty good on their own merit. They're like a grungy garage band type of situation. Nothing spectacular,
right.
but I'd say better than most stuff you'd hear on the radio. So go give them a listen.
Right, makes sense.
And I'd agree with your description there. So I'd say with the e-whore, cam girl, whatever you want to call them, type of female, it is a woman that has been raised by the internet, in the internet being a replacement of what their father figure should have been. And you can see that especially with all these girls with OnlyFans and these online communities of orbiters is what they're called. Men giving them constant praise and attention and likes on their Instagram pages or in their Discord servers. And I'll get to a few examples in specific. Because it is that narcissistic satisfaction, like what men would receive from pornography, but in terms of the female psychology, in hacking their sexual gratification system.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very, very destructive process, most of whom don't even realize it, compounding with the effects of things like the birth control pill and so many other advents of the sexual revolution that have been damaging women sexually and psychologically for generations now. And older members of the audience and the wider population in general may not understand this because it is such a newer phenomena, even though, yeah, sexual revolution happened in the 60s and so on, what else, but the consequences aren't really being seen until you see them now in these youngest generations. Millennials, even the older end of millennials, don't really see it because most of them have had started their families and so on and whatever, and had whatever difficulties overcome and are more or less the norm now. But the younger side of millennials, and especially Gen Z, are seeing this volatile state of, and I hate this term, the sexual marketplace, because there's a certain categorization of everything being in economic terms that I really despise, and it is part of the reason why we distance ourselves from capitalism as the end-all be-all too. But it's the incentivization of psychology, or the incentivization of the capitalistic system in Western society to understand psychology in the way that they have funded so much research into it, like the Edward Bernays of the world had done, to most effectively prime, propagandize, and market to people the things that the corporations or the cathedral at large wants to market people in doing or consuming.
That does bring up
On the
an interesting
incel
topic. Oh, sorry. I think there's a delay between me and you. I think when I talk...
Yeah, there is, but no worries.
Yeah. Anyways, but what you're saying does bring up an interesting point, how, it's, the principle of marketing since the 60s, probably way prior to even then, in a much more subdued fashion, however, was, sex sells. That's generally the way that they operate. So the sexual marketplace being a term that is used to describe what is really like the dating pool, or however you would like to whatever other synonym you would like to use for it, kind of derives from that sentiment that sex sells, that principle of marketing.
Yeah. It's all surrounding the psychoanalytics of marketing and propaganda, which is essentially what it is. And you're right, Edward Bernays was in the 30s, like late 30s, early 40s. So this is going back almost a century now, with where the research began and why, and how it's being used now by governments of the world and NGOs thereof. But with incels too, like you said too, Vincent, it's right there in the name. It's involuntary celibacy. It's men mostly. There are people who refer to themselves as femcels, but there are a very small minority of this mostly online socialization or social categorization of people. And these men want to be sexually active, want to be, I guess, in a relationship and feel loved in a certain sense, but may have a very skewed perception of what that is. And that skewed perception might come from things like pornography or various other factors in their lives. There might be some underlying psychological reason that makes them repulsive, because for the most part, they seem to be average looking, average acting men that have all right jobs or whatever else. They're not the most hideous creatures you've ever seen or the poorest scum of the earth type of deal, and that's why women are rejecting them, although they will overwhelmingly suggest those things to each other mostly. There's a very big self-deprecating nature to these communities. It's almost like a masochistic ritual for them.
It's a good way of describing it.
And so, yeah, which I actually do have to credit ContraPoints there too. As much of a leftist it is, ContraPoints does make some good points from time to time and does it in a very good way. ContraPoints actually did make a video delving into the incel issue that I would recommend watching, because it was very useful in my own research and pointing in not only how the left thinks about these things, because this isn't just a left or right issue, this is a societal issue overall, and not just in the West, in most places around the world. China's dealing with this. The more industrialized aspects of the Middle East are dealing with this. Western-friendly nations like Japan are dealing with this. I think it's a growing concern in Brazil as well, and they're like, Korea. So it's, the more industrialized a place gets, it seems the more this issue comes about.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
It's, and it might be a byproduct of this industrialization in the first place. I think the largest part of it, like I said in the introduction, comes with this consequence of the internet and its consequences and implications that have been seeping into society that we haven't really realized or have known about until we start seeing the effects of it bubble to the surface. And because they've been going on so long and are so embedded in our society now, it's going to be very, very difficult to correct and stop if we even can. And that's alongside so many other things, like what Ted Kaczynski would point out, for instance, in the Industrial Revolution, and the effects of that period of time that we are still dealing with as well, because these things have happened on such a rapid pace on even a societal level that the effects aren't always immediate, and even if they are, they won't be able to be dealt with for generations to come. And by that time, the damage is mostly already done, and you're in a very strange position now because you don't know what to do as an individual or as a society at large. And that's even if the society is addressing the issue in the first place. Like with incels, they're mostly not, and they hadn't been until people like Elliot Rodger came onto the scene. And that's a whole another extreme, even within the extreme of incels themselves. But we've already gone in 100 different directions, and I do want to condense this so no one gets confused. But this is, as you can make out now, a very dense and very intrusive topic into all aspects of our lives, because sexuality is such an explicitly and implicitly necessary component of the human condition that it does affect us in ways in our life that you may not really realize until those extremes come out. And then you go, oh, okay, there's this sort of background noise of sexual frustration or release in these different aspects. And you might go, oh, that sounds a lot like Freud. Yeah, he wasn't wrong about everything. Again, Bernays, I believe, is a nephew of Freud. And so this tradition of psychoanalysis extends into the realm of economics and marketing and propaganda. And so there is a lot there just on the real world effect of them all that, Freud was kind of getting to. But
Right.
that's an aside. Vincent, you have any of the topics we kind of threw out in the aether that you want to focus on and then get to the others as we go?
Well, yeah. Actually, I think we can, if you want, we can kind of just like bring it back to the most fundamental point that we were making in the beginning, which was, first of all, it is a lot of a it is an issue that older people don't have to deal with as much. It is an issue that is facing younger people more so than older people, especially in I would say anyone who was born from about 1990 and prior likely has not had to deal with this issue, and probably won't understand even the dynamic of the topic at hand here, because it was so different. But I guess getting back to the fundamentals, if you are a single man, I saw a woman make a Twitter post that was kind of
Tweet.
Yeah, she I saw a woman tweet that was kind of directed at at men in a provocative way. Obviously, it was not intended to be taken seriously, And in this day and age, when you make a post, it is not intended to be necessarily "quote unquote" taken seriously. It's meant to drive the likes in. It's meant to be controversial. It's meant to be provocative in a sense, and so. It says, she said, the dating pool for young women is literally porn addicts as number 1, sensitive guys who you have to perform constant emotional labor for as number 2, narcissistic if not sociopathic gym bros as number 3, emotionally distant manipulators as number 4, and performative woke men who still treat women like shit as number 5. And in response to this, I saw another tweet from a man's perspective, and it says that the dating pool for men is, body positive females who are very, very overweight, teen moms, the woke progressive type as number 3, e-girl, the type of, posting your body online. What was it? What was the term? Conceited with low self-esteem.
Eeyore, cam girl.
Yeah.
Conceited, low self-esteem. Yeah.
And then the 20-something party girl who goes out and drinks and smokes and whatnot. And obviously, these are very provocative messages back and forth, meant to kind of drive the conversation in an argumentative fashion. But there is truth to this in the sense that a lot of people fall into these categories here, mentioned by both sexes, mentioned by,
I'd say 90% of people on both sides, 90% of men and 90% of women fall into any one or a multiple of those 5 categories. And it's kind of sad.
If they're young.
Yeah,
especially.
they both, if they are young, but there are a certain mentality of older generations that do have this licentious decadence to them, that want to permanently extend their youth beyond their natural limitations. And so they try to act young, even though it's very obvious they aren't. People into their 30s and 40s acting like they are in their teens or 20s still. And it's a very concerning trend that's far newer as well.
Actually,
but nothing like
kind of going down that
a Gen Z.
Sorry for interrupting. I know there's a delay as well, so
No. You're good.
But actually, kind of going down that, it is a it is a newer phenomenon that people who are, I would say people who were born around 90 to 95, usually making it around to be 28 to 32 around now. I know the math is off, but you know what I'm saying. People who are of that age tend to not be developed past high school because that internet age hit right when they were either entering high school, entering middle school, or exiting high school and going into college. I would say if you were in college at the time of the internet revolution, if you will, you're generally free from this type of what's the term? Infantile mindset of kind of lacking a development, lacking that last step to the development into the adulthood that most people have experienced when they get to that age, because of the internet. It was because of the internet, but definitely it is a phenomenon I think we will keep seeing as time progresses. People stop getting out of that high school mindset around that age, where they should be getting out of it. Definitely.
And we're just finishing off on this aspect of older generations not getting it. I interact with some of these people online or in person, like how I always bring up the bears and Beartarian and stuff like that. And a lot of them are these older millennial, Gen X, Zennial types. Very, very few boomers. But these older middle-aged type people that have started families, that have their own businesses, that have made a comfortable prospect in their own communities that they've now created online and fostered in person, that just don't see any of this degeneracy or depravity because they explicitly exclude it, and they do a very good job at curating and making sure that none of that penetrates into these aspects of their community. And I very highly respect them for that, because then it protects their children from being exposed to the same things and then history repeating itself or prolonging into another generation.
Yeah,
However,
definitely.
that doesn't make the problem go away. And so their mentality about it is kind of a boomer mindset in a way, as much as they themselves put down the boomers for all of these degenerate aspects of society that they kind of propagated. They don't see this internet subcultures of promiscuous e-girls and porn-addicted incels and everything else in between that is going on with these younger generations. And so they're saying, oh, just act more like a man. Oh, just don't sleep around and things like that. Like these very tepid platitudes that you'd hear from more or less detached people. And they do try to be detached. They call the rest of society Babylon for a good reason. I mean, that's essentially what we're describing right now. But as well as their hearts are placed in, they're in the right place, they don't have any good or practical advice for this situation, because it is so much more dire than they realize. And it's such a more far-reaching problem than any of them realize. And that's what people not too much older than us either. That's new, like fathers and mothers that have more recently gotten married. But like I said, it's just those older-ish millennials that have gotten to that point of their lives. And none of them had the opportunity or ability to go down these avenues, because the internet wasn't as pervasive for them growing up. The internet wasn't as totalitarian, in a sense, as they were developing. So there was some sort of normalcy in however traditional a sense you can conceive of it, as they developed and then went into adulthood. And then it didn't really matter at that point, because they were already established in a world that we never got to know. Like Vincent and I grew up in a post 9/11 society. Same with my younger brother. He very much did the same thing. We've never known some of the things that these older types of people do actually have memory of, and that goes along with dating and interacting with people in a normal way, having conversations with strangers, or how the procedural process of a relationship goes, so that it's not just sex on the first date type thing and then you're forgotten about and cast aside like a cum rag. Or, like, again, sorry for being vulgar, but that's just the how this topic is going down. But that very much is how things have been going down in society. And even in more conservative spheres of things, they're tainted by this same mentality. Like, I remember there was like a girls in bikinis or like borderline strippers at the not America First. It was whatever the thing Charlie Kirk was hosting, and it was like around 2019, 2020, and people were lambasting him for doing things so flagrantly degenerate. But like Vincent said, sex sells, and so these young, more or less involuntary celibate men that are joining the conservative movement, wanting to find that, you know, trad Catholic GF meme type of caricature of a woman, and then get googly-eyed over these basic bimbos, for lack of a better term. And so it's this very strange type of unmapped territory that just the human psyche has never had to deal with before. And even just slightly older people than us have no way of confronting this issue. And so our younger selves, the younger generation, is kind of left on our own to figure it out entirely on ourselves. And it's a very scary conundrum.
You know, it's interesting that you that you pointed it out, how, I guess, you know, we did grow up in a post 9/11 society, and not only that, but it was right around the age of the internet itself. So you saying that, you know, we would not know the proper process of a relationship, at least what would seem to be proper if we use the 20th century as a reference point, because there's such a divide. You know, there is that Y2K divide, pretty much, but it's really a Y 2001 divide, really. But yeah, definitely. The natural process of a relationship is pretty much unknown to anyone who is below, I would say 28, 29, I would say even 30. Definitely.
Yeah.
Trying to navigate that sphere, and then...
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
And just to add into, that's nothing that we've willingly chose. These are all processes or consequences that have been forced upon us as we've grown up, which is, again, something that these slightly older people don't really understand or recognize in a way. And we're not this way because we want to be. Most everyone doesn't want to be this. Even most women who may be making a lot of money, being a cam girl, e-whore type situation, doesn't actually want to be this way. They constantly post about wanting to have this pseudo-traditional type of like motherhood and baking bread type deal stuff that they have tweets and Instagram posts about, and then, you know, basically wearing nothing in the next post and saying, "Tee, subscribe to my OnlyFans." And so it's, again, this clash of circumstances that we've never been in before that's been forced upon us.
Yeah, it's imposition versus disposition. And what sucks is that it's not necessarily a single entity that is forcing it upon anyone, but it's just the state of the world these days creates an environment in which kids have to adapt. I say kids very, very broadly, in which they have to adapt to the certain circumstances that is brought about by, you know, instant gratification and things like that, things that most people have never had access to. And one large part of that, let me see if I can present the idea right, is that, you know, the type of release that one would feel when in a relationship, especially in a like a developed relationship, the type of feeling that comes about with that is usually the same chemical reaction in the brain as someone who has a online reaction and receives that instant gratification, that instant dopamine, whether that be in the form of pornography for men or a donation to the OnlyFans for women. And that's not to say it's either or, but generally speaking, that is the case. That chemical reaction that you would have with your significant other is now being had instantaneously with strangers on the internet over and over and over again. And so it's almost an impossibility to have what would be a normal process of a relationship, a normal procedure, if you will, because people's brains are so burnt out on the dopamine that they really can't fathom having that mundane of a reaction when the reactions they've gotten on the internet are just so much more intense. Does that make sense? It's like chasing the first high over and over again.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's like drug addiction. And it very much goes to that idiom of, oh, well, chivalry's dead. Chivalry's not dead, neither is damehood. You see a longing there in men and women to want to return to this type of masculine and feminine dichotomy, but because of forces outside of our control have done this gender swap on society or forced men and women into roles they would not traditionally occupy, that border between what's masculine and feminine has been eroded. And another good video that kind of exemplified this is by a girl named Olivia Sun, and her handle on YouTube is Ali Sun Via, if you know how to type that in right. But she had a very nice video and a surprisingly intelligent video too, not to be demeaning towards her. I just didn't expect that the level of intellectual vigor she did put into how we perceive love, especially in the younger generations. And it is that instant gratification of things. And I say with this, chivalry is not dead and damehood is not dead. It's courtship that is dead. There is no procedure, like Vincent was saying, that we can go back to and reinvigorate, so that there is a process, and it's not just typing in keywords into a search bar and then we get the eye candy that we do the dirty to or whatever. It's this focus of society on sex as opposed to the relationships that should presuppose it, and that might be one of the most damning aspects about anything in regards to this whole issue, because people don't want to put in the time or effort due to lack of convenience or expediency into it. And this girl Olivia Sun was pointing that out in her video as well, especially in how social media influences people's perceptions on their otherwise healthy relationships, and how women will kind of be socially reprogrammed into believing they're in some sort of toxic or abusive relationship because some influencer on TikTok or Instagram was saying, oh, well, isn't this suspicious, or look for this red flag, and all these dumb nonsense things that are making women paranoid about their partners that they otherwise should not be. And it's having very detrimental effects. And like men are seeing it too, and they don't know how to react to it because it's something that you may not see in the moment, because people are so protective over their phones and what they're viewing, and it won't even let their partners into whatever that is on their phones or devices or so on.
I will say, as someone who has been in a relationship for quite some time, that was very, because we've all been products of modernity up until that type of initiation, that type of awakening, right? And so when I first got into my relationship, I will say I was a lot farther. No, I was not as far down the path I am now as I am now. And so I did have that mindset where I did not want anyone, including the person I'm with, to be on my phone whatsoever, because that was an invasion of my privacy. And to a certain extent, I do believe that you should have a certain privacy from everyone, including your significant other, but not to the extent of hiding every single everyday interaction. But on the flip side of that, there is a lack of trust that comes around as well. One of the issues I know plenty of people have to deal with is that constant feeling that if the significant other is on their phone, then they must be doing something bad. If they are texting someone, it must be a bad thing being sent. If they are hanging out with someone outside of hanging out with you, it must be a bad thing. It's that lack of trust, like you said, that comes from an insecurity which is generated mostly online, mostly by seeing these romanticized ideals of relationships in media and things like that, and then understanding, it's that rude awakening that a relationship can never go that way, that drives a person to be not as trusting. It is, very much that low self-esteem thing as well, where people, for example, don't feel like they are ever going to be good enough for the person that they have, so they feel like they constantly have to keep watch on them. That's an issue that arises as well. And so,
Yeah.
with the problem in modernity is that there is no standard for normal. And so, I've had to deprogram myself from wanting to not show or wanting to keep my phone as my most private personal possession, and instead I look at it more as like a tool, more or less, that I use for certain things. And now it's fine. Now it's fine. I don't care if she goes to my phone. She's probably on my phone right now, right? But the point is that I don't care. I don't mind. There's nothing. There was nothing to hide, and now the feeling of having that thing to hide, even though there was nothing to hide, has subsided, because it's kind of like a deprogramming yourself. It's a deprogramming of it's a process, most definitely.
And I think it's a part of this societal paranoia that kind of exists, because there are the real world implications of this too, because of this norm of promiscuity that now exists in society. And you may actually have those situations where your significant other is cheating on you, and you're not sure of if they are going to stay faithful or not, because of this world of the sexual marketplace or how have you, that is open to everyone in more or less terms. And I mean, you're dating them for a reason. You want to be married to them for a reason. That means other people want whatever you have as well, or seeking what your partner has for themselves. And so there is a sort of, even in scenarios of marriage where you think you're supposed to be the most secure, you've committed to each other, there isn't this commitment. It seems to be a fear of commitment and stagnation in society that everyone's always so paranoid about, that is playing subconsciously in everyone's mind when it comes to these people possibly cheating. And it does happen way too often. Like, go back 20 years ago, someone cheating on someone was a very big deal. Today, now it's like, oh, you cheated on him for the 5th time. Well, why not just dump him? And the onus is more on the guy who's getting cheated on. And I'm not saying this is like a women cheat more or anything. Not gonna point a finger at any one sex over the other. But it's the onus of being pointed at the person being cheated on now, that, oh, well, they were the problem in the first place, that's why the person was cheating. It's like, how deranged do you have to be on a personal psychological level and on a societal level to think that's in any way okay, or to have that be the norm, whereas within a lifetime, not even, 20 years ago, that was unthinkable. And then not long before that, the restrictions around these ideals were even more sort of strict and sacred and not meant to be crossed. And they've all been eroded, and eroded very successfully, especially by these pervasive movements like the whole LGBT and whatnot. And you can see very much the attraction of these incel type people, or these e-whore type people, to dabble in these communities, because they're either so oversaturated with what would be normal heterosexual interaction that now they're going to other extremes, something that they perceive as a taboo, or that they weren't really ever into, but now they need to get that next high, so they go into ever more weird and degenerate types of pornography or sexual experiences to monetize and produce. And so it's this degeneration of sexuality because people are just down bad, as the kids say, and it's gross.
Yeah.
There's just no other better way to put it. It's just people are so desperate for this type of feeling that, yeah, it's just, so what? I'll be gay now, and it's like, oh, that's not normal. This is a problem.
It's funny, true. It's funny. It's funny too because it is true that there seems to be that individualistic mentality to it, where it's like, okay, well, if I can't go and get it, if I can't go and get this this dopamine rush that I get from dating someone, then I'll just give it to myself. And that's the idea really behind very, very masculine women, or what are in a sense very emasculate or effeminate men, who almost in a sense want to be their own girlfriend because they have that lack of awareness around that. You know what I mean? It's a very true phenomenon that's been
no. Enter stage right, bad dragon, not sponsored.
What?
I just let that hang in the air and don't address it again.
Okay. Anyways, but yeah, it is true that they do kind of want to give that pleasure to themselves by being what it is that they desire, and it really has flipped the sexes on their head, if you will. There are very, very masculine women being almost idolized in today's society, and very, very emasculate men being idolized in today's society, and that's another part of what causes this snowball effect to kind of keep going, because now young women are looking to these OnlyFans models saying, well, this is my role model. They're looking to these very masculine women saying, oh, this is my role model. They're looking to the body positive, the teen mom, the whatever it may be, and saying, oh, this is my role model. And the same thing with men. They're looking at these very feminized versions of men and saying, oh, this is what I need to be. The Justin Trudeau's, or the Seth Rogens of the world, and saying, oh, this is what I need to be. This is what being a man looks like. When really it's very much more archetypal, and this archetypal mindset doesn't, the Novus Kivus that we talked about last episode, doesn't appear anywhere, and appears less and less in the world as people tend to embody what it is to which they aspire, and who it is that inspires them.
That's actually something that the Olivia Sun girl that I mentioned was bringing up in her video on this. And she brought up the psychologist Eric Fromm, and how it's this personality marketplace, similar to like this sexual marketplace as it's described. And it from his writing, it was more or less the same thing, just by a different name. And it is men and women, although she focused on men in her video, conforming themselves to standards that the other sex is placing on them, so that they perceivably are more marketable in this sexual marketplace, and are conforming to the lowest common denominator, if you will, to so that they can get the broadest reach and sell themselves, if you will, and literally selling themselves and their body and mentality to something that may not truly be them. And it's very much been that way because of the attacks on traditional masculinity and femininity, with men acting far more submissive and emotional, whereas women are supposed to be acting far more aggressive and assertive. And it's just, even from a physical standpoint, it just looks cartoonish when you have these people acting in such a way. And it, implicitly there's something wrong with that. And I mean, some people it just comes naturally, but right, as the overarching majority of society, no, that's not how it rolls, because men are the dominant sex and women are the submissive sense. And I don't mean that in any way of one is superior to the other. I mean that men are the sex to, go out and fight the tiger and hunt the woolly mammoth type deal and wage war to protect the women and the children, while the women kind of submit to the power of the man only because he's the protection thereof, and then she takes care of everything at the home and builds or maintains the society while men protect and build it. And so there's this interplay between both men and women that everyone in modern society always forgets about, that our ancestors had down really, really well up until like the Victorian era. Then it starts to dissolve because now industrialization and everything else is coming about, and these norms start getting eroded and questioned. And nothing wrong with questioning things in the first place, but getting rid of them without questioning the process of getting rid of it is maybe just as destructive or more so than the norm that was there in the first place. So it's a whole factor of things that just end up harming people on an individual and a societal basis.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of what you were saying earlier about courtship being dead. It's interesting to think about it in that sense because, courtship is very much the process by which has been replaced with dating. For example, in Islam, it is haram to even date, haram being a sin. It is haram to date before marriage. So courting and courtship and things like that, all of this stuff, you would not see that in an Islamic society. It would be it would either be a friendship with a permissible marriage by nature of the parents of the two parties, or it would be a more or less arranged marriage, but arranged marriages are haram in Islam as well. But it's that same idea of the marriage having that same value to it, which was placed upon dating post-Victorian era, which was then given to, which is now given just to the sexual gratification of the thing. It's the process has gotten a lot shorter, and I guess the same sense that every other process has also gotten a lot shorter. But it's definitely interesting to think about how the idea of courting has changed over the years, and now it's like the idea is almost absent. It seems in this society today, you are left alone as an individual. You are going to be very lucky if you find that traditional type of person to spend your life with, whether or not you're on either side. I think you brought up I forget who it was that you brought up, but there was a woman who made a video about this where she's very spiritually oriented, type of like capital T traditionalist, and is still having a hard time finding that. Yeah, Philosophicat, yeah.
Yeah. Which I wanted to bring her up next, and someone similar down the Avolian vein. So I'm glad you segued it to her.
Yeah, but I remember you saying that she was having trouble finding a mate, even in the circle, which is so drastically saturated by men. And it's interesting because the men in this circle are still dealing with these same issues. They still do fall into the category of, the porn addicts, the narcissist, the emotionally distant manipulators, the and whatever else categories were mentioned in the tweet. They still do fall into those categories. They still do have these attributes about them that they have not worked beyond, because a lot of people don't put their...
Well, there's a few reasons for that, if I may.
Yeah.
And there's a big one, overarching, and that's hypergamy. And that's exactly what is causing such trouble for women like Philosophicat. And what people on the left, like people like ContraPoints, have a hard time dealing with as a fundamental truth in the implicit sexual interactions between men and women. because the left-wing sphere of things want to just attribute it to this notion of the red pill, the going back to the roots of it with this documentary movie that came out in early 2015 or so, that got picked up by the MGTOW community, and that's men going their own way, and also by the pickup artists and stuff like that. And the left-wing sphere kind of lump all these people in alongside with the incels as well, while also backhandedly promoting things like sex work and the e-whores and all that. And they're a fine addition to this sphere of things, even though sexually they're in the same sort of effect with women as opposed to men. But ignoring that contradiction, it's not the point. The point is that this concept of hypergamy is something that's ingrained into us. It's the fact that women want to marry up or seek men of higher status, if not of themselves, then of other men. And the big issue, especially now today, with so many women being pushed into careers, into college, into making money for themselves, degree paths, all things like this, all markers of what you would think is success and status, they then have these accolades that would normally be held by men. And now comparing it to a lower status man who, might be attractive and well-to-do, has a great personality, and it would be emotionally, spiritually, and physically a perfect fit for them, they don't want to marry below them because this person is like a tradesman with no university degree, and they might not be making as much money as this woman in some office job with a very high-level master's or PhD type of degree. And so there's this implicitness of hypergamy there, and that's going on with Philosophicate in her being a quite bright lady and being very spiritually intelligent, and now she needs a man that is even more so that quality than herself. And that's very difficult because she's quite a rare breed of woman herself, and her being so high in this intellectual stratum, there are even fewer men like that. So yeah. She's almost put herself in that situation. I don't want to blame her either, because it's, now she knows what she needs and she knows what society needs overall. But because of that hypergamy that still exists there, now she's kind of like, oh, well, I don't want a spiritually vacuous man to marry. And that would be a whole different set of issues that she'd be unhappy with, and that her potential husband would be unhappy with too as well. And you don't want more statistics added to the divorce rate that we have in society nowadays as well.
Right, definitely. And that's exactly why women were essentially outside of caste. They were generally compared to be the same, generally considered to be the same caste as their, excuse me, as their father, if they were not married, and as their husband if they were. It's that horizontal or vertical marriage, but not necessarily a downwards facing one, definitely. And so that's exactly the problem that she's facing, I believe, as well. Yeah, there are not as many men, especially in the traditionalistic spheres, who know exactly what they're talking about to satisfy the needs that she has for herself. Definitely.
Mm-hmm. And that goes along the same route of things, because there are people online that are saying the same things as herself, that are saying the exact same things as Philosophicate, and are saying some of the same things as this Olivia Sun girl, which kind of go down the Evolian path that we've brought up in previous episodes, especially the masculinity and femininity episode as well. And his categories on actualizing yourself as the best man or the best woman you could be in these ways, spiritually, physically, emotionally, so on. The problem is that if you go about that in the wrong way, the normie population, as you were, will react quite vehemently to it. And I saw this myself with an interaction, or several interactions, because the video went viral, of a man by the name of Nuance Now. And he started out on TikTok and moved to YouTube, and he's had his accounts banned several times, and for various different reasons. But he says a lot of the exact same stuff that we've been saying this whole time. He just says it in a way that comes across like he's an asshole. And no matter what truth you might be getting at, how right you may be, if people think you're an asshole, they don't care. They'll admit that you're right, but still refuse to listen to you or refuse to let you in on the in-group because you're acting like an asshole. And that's what happened with Nuance Now, especially with big figures like Penguin Zero or Charlie, as people might know him now, or Critical, as he's most famously called. And he did a whole video looking at this, responding to this Nuance Now video called Women Aren't Real. And it doesn't exist on his channel anymore, Nuance Now, not Critical's, because it went so viral, and I think it got reported and banned and whatever else by YouTube. But there's plenty of people reacting to it, usually quite negatively, and like mirror videos just so that people can see it and mostly laugh at it. The thing is, though, that the content of what he was saying, I listened to and I recognized, and I was going, well, nothing he's saying is wrong. It's just how he's saying it. And that made me think of the interactions mostly, too, between men and women. And I think this is a very crucial part of it, alongside with women being the way they are and the feminization of men as they are. It's not so much what you say, it's how you say it and how you go about it. And there are some times when you might have a woman, not necessarily your partner or anything, maybe a sibling or another type of family member or a friend that is female, and they just want to vent to you about a certain thing. But in our male, masculine minds, whatever they're venting about, we try to give them solutions for. And they don't want solutions. They just want to vent to you and to have you hold them or something, or comfort them in a way. They're not looking for solutions.
I was just talking about
it's
this
very
the other day.
Strange.
I was, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very strange difference in male and female psychology, but that's just how it is sometimes. But our immediate assumption, us being men, or I guess not assumption, our immediate reaction is to go and just solve the issue and not complain about it, just do it. Whereas women are that more, again, society maintaining type of communal, verbal creature. And again, I don't want to be demeaning in my language in any ways. Men are creatures in different aspects as well.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
they're going to you as a rock of comfort and stability, not necessarily a go solve this issue for me. As willing as we are to do it, that's not what they want or need. And it very much sounded, everyone's reaction to this Nuance Now guy, that's how they were reacting to them. Everyone was kind of conscious of the problems there and what he was saying. He even brought up that women don't have the same process of spiritual ascension that men do, which is what women like Philosophicat are very conscious of, especially going down the Evolian school of thought on spirituality and going back further with Ganon and all that. You know the spiel. Mm-hmm. But it was how he was saying it that people were like, oh, women can't be close with God? What are you? You're an incel, buddy. And it's like, I understand why they were reacting that way, but they also would agree that if you point out these issues in a different light, they'd be like, oh, yeah, no, I totally get that in that way. And that's why I think the Olivia Sun Girl is so helpful, because she was saying those same things that this Nuance Now guy was saying, but in a much more feminine-friendly way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's also, an issue that we face today, especially with... There's a lot of pent-up anger felt at this situation by people on both sides. So when people talk about it, they become very, very passionate. They become very passionate about the topic that they're talking about. And I haven't seen the video in question, so I can't say if it was passion or just straight up, anger, or an unwillingness to understand or to be nice or whatever. But generally, people get very passionate about this topic because there is a lot of pent up anger, pent up aggression, and stuff like that, pent up frustration that they feel at not being able to receive what it is that they actually fundamentally need as people from the opposite sex. And so when it comes to an interaction of certain types with the opposite sex, or trying to present this issue in a light that might be more neutral, might be more factual and objective, kind of the same light that we're trying to look at it here, it comes off as very, very aggressive, very passionate, very heated, in the sense that it should not be. It's the same way that you deal with societal issues such as anything that characterizes the Kali Yuga, the descent of man into this materialistic and atomized form of himself, shell of his former self, if you will. And people are very mad about that, but it's that same reaction, that same type of angry, passion-driven reaction that needs to kind of be left to simmer and cool down a little bit until it becomes something you can articulate better and get to the bottom of better, and even solve in certain cases.
That's actually reminds me of I believe it's a Chinese proverb, is you can't see your reflection in a pot of boiling water. And I think that's very, that's a concise way of putting what you just described, in this situation being a very impassioned issue. And so that emotionalism, putting a veil over these issues, and it's people just being opinionated and discontent with possibly good solutions, but not hearing the other person because they're saying it in a type of way, or saying a certain thing that they think is an attack on them personally. And there's so much of that now online and in real life. And that's another point that we wanted to bring up too, is that people might be saying, oh, well, this is all online. That's not really the case. As Academic Agent often says, and even what I found out from this Olivia Sungirl, a thinker by the name of Jean Baudrillard, online is more real than reality. Or as Academic Agent says, Twitter is more real than reality, because people so hyper-focus on what goes on in Twitter as affecting the real world. And often it does. And it has real world implications and like very dire consequences. But from Jean Baudrillard's perspective, it was the synthesis of a form of art or some means of expression of a real phenomenon, of a real thing like love, and that being expressed in something like a movie. And now there's another movie based off that movie that then tries to depict that same form of love in this more idealistic way, that then gets more and more distant from the real thing itself. And by consequence, that dilutes people's perspective or perception of the real thing in reality. So now this hyper-reality becomes more reality than the original thing. And that might sound a little confusing, but just let it sit for a second, and then you'll see that the layers kind of form like an onion, like an onion donkey. But it's this episode might just be a little childish. Just bear with me there.
No, I know what you're saying.
You see what I'm getting at.
Yeah, no, I love it, like an onion. No, but it's true. There are layers to it, and you know what I think is kind of funny though, is that the way in which it's perceived, or the way in which it's portrayed in these various pieces of media, is a lot different, I would say, than, because there's that idea that we talked about before, that kind of LARP it till you are it, fake it till you make it type of mentality. And that same mentality, trying to embody your impressions, or people who inspire you, trying to embody your inspirators, definitely applies here, but in a kind of negative sense, especially with what it seems like you're saying, where the and the reason for that is because the media that is being created is inspired by real events, trying to idealize them or trying to create an ideal form of them. But the inspiration, or the I guess you could say the person who is inspired is generally not as good as the person to whom they aspire. So the concept that is inspired is not necessarily as good as the real life conception that is being aspired to by that piece of media. But then that piece of media then becomes the item of inspiration for younger generations who watch that piece of media, or observe that piece of media in any type of fashion, and then they try to aspire to that piece of media. So it's just this constant, like I said before, a snowball effect of, it's a negative feedback loop, really.
Yeah, it's like a more devolved version of that mosaic we brought up on the what was it, the atheism in spirituality episode. Where we were getting into God being this infinite regressive mosaic type fractalized thing. It's like that, but reversed almost.
Yeah,
where
exactly.
It's degenerating instead of going on that. And that actually reminded me, with speaking of the Twitter being more real than reality type of conception, someone did post a tweet talking exactly about that, of the fake until you make it LARPing mentality that we're trying to have people go down, that Kess's law, indulging in the irony until it becomes sincere. And this person stated that LARPing is an incredibly powerful spiritual tool, because Napoleon was LARPing as Caesar, who was LARPing as Alexander the Great, who was LARPing as Achilles, who was LARPing as Hercules, and so on and so forth. And, okay, well, each of these characters get more distant in the past and more mythological as things go on, but that's exactly what we mean also in this form of regress on reality basing itself off of media that's now this hyper reality of a thing. And so that, I think that's a very succinct description of what we're trying to say. Just apply that now to love and sexuality in the 21st century, specifically with Gen Z and the younger side of millennials. And it's this weird hyper romanticization of just completely unrealistic standards or fictionalizations that people generally don't operate on, like these weird 5-cent novels that you'd pick up at the drugstore, and people would read with like Fabio on the front cover, and it's totally like obscene type of fabrication of reality, but it's something that people now expect from their actual relationships and their actual sexual partners and things like that, and it's very concerning. But when you try to walk people away from that edge, they get really upset with you because, why can't it be this idealized vision in my head? Why can't it be this romanticized thing that I see other people post about online? Why can't I have that? And it's like you're taking away something from them, even though it never existed in the first place.
Yeah, and
so now people are defending near to the death this hope, if you will. And incels act much the same way, because it's like, well, maybe if I just change a little bit about myself, some woman will eventually like me, and then other incels just beat them down and tell them no. Sorry, Vincent, you were saying?
Oh no, no, it is definitely that. I guess the way I would put it is that it's not so much that you're taking away something from someone, but them trying to. Are you trying to explain to them that it can never be? And I guess in a sense that, most people online idealize themselves to an extent. It's that same principle being applied to the self almost, in a sense. So I guess the way I would describe it is
it's
they do see these idealized versions of relationships online, and why can't I have that? It's because they're seeing someone online present their relationship as if it is that romanticized ideal version of a relationship that does not exist in the real world whatsoever. And so that principle of idealization then gets adopted by somebody else who says, okay, well, I don't have this, but I'm going to make it seem like I do. So then they kind of perpetuate this idea of romanticization of something that can never be. And so this perpetuation keeps going, and the self-esteem of people who are on the receiving end of it just keeps lowering and lowering, and it really is a negative feedback loop.
And that feeds into the extremes of the issue too, because now people have these idealizations and these fantasies that they have in their heads, sometimes parasocial relationships that they develop with cam girls and e-whores and things like that they're spending thousands of dollars on to try and simulate some sort of perception of a relationship there. And there's even cases of people dropping 10 grand just to go meet this cam girl that they see penetrate themselves with dildos online, to go hug once and then never interact with again. And it's very disturbing and mentally damaging facet of society. And even beyond that, you get cases like Elliot Rodger or Bianca Devins. And with those in particular, that's when these frustrations turn violent, because people are just so frustrated to these facts, frustrated to these innate desires, or are perpetuating these desires and abusing their status as is, that then lead into the worst things happening. And with Elliot Rodger, I grew up seeing like memes about him, more or less, but never really understanding what happened with him. And I still never really researched the issue all that much, but I know that, he was a self-proclaimed incel, and then he went and shot up a bunch of people because he was so sexually frustrated in not being able to find a woman who he could have that relationship with. And he wasn't a bad-looking guy. He was a pretty affluent guy. I'm pretty sure his father was like a high-ranking Hollywood executive of some sort. It was more or less his disposition and like character that, I guess, repulsed women in a way, and that coalesced into him never really figuring out how to have healthy relationships with women. Like, there's even so far in one of his writings, and I think in his manifesto or something, him resenting his sister because he walked in his house one day hearing his younger sister having sex before he ever could, and that there was like a certain level of spite there, and then he ends up going and shooting a bunch of people because of it. And it's like, well, it seems like a very extreme thing, but it's happened more than once now, and it's forever increasingly ridiculous circumstances, like people attaching themselves to fictional characters and doing these mass shootings in their name or something like that. And it's very, very disturbing when you start investigating these things further.
Oh, yeah.
Or in the Bianca Devins case, where she was an e-girl herself, the scene girl type of look pretty for the camera and manipulate all these men around her to give her attention and to give her money and to give her whatever she needs. And she was very consciously doing this. That she was running a Discord server where she had all of these guys that she called her orbiters, because that's just the term for the men who are infatuated with these women online that do orbit them like some sort of planetary system, and borderline stalk them in a way, but think they have some sort of deeper relationship there that just doesn't exist, like these parasocial relationships. But she was doing this in a much more malicious means, and consciously abusing and using these men for whatever pleasurable desires she had in mind. And one of them she pushed over the edge, and she just outright said to him, "You mean nothing to me. I hate you, yada, yada, yada," after he did X, Y, and Z and knew her for however long. Thing was, he lived fairly close by to her. And it ended up happening where he kidnapped her, murdered her, and then tried committing suicide and posted it all online.
Yeah.
And then you get that scenario too. And it's like, well, obviously the lad shouldn't have gone out and killed her, but you kind of understand what pushed him over the edge in that circumstance too. And it's this conceited with low self-esteem type of girl that used and abused these guys, ending up with her own demise. Some sick poetry right there on me.
Yeah. No, it's definitely true. And it really is, it's funny because you don't see this on the inverse happening quite at all. Even though I would say that women have as tough a time in the dating sphere as men do. That toughness manifests in a different way. And so, where it is almost as if the man is out trying to get the woman is trying to attract the guy. And so this manifests in different types of behaviors that have different results to them. And so when there is that one who is actually successful at attracting them, the masculine urge to follow it, to be attracted to that person, definitely gets activated. And in a sense, that seems to be what happened here, is that there was, there's a lot of one-sided relationships that go on the internet, especially when it comes to streamers, YouTubers, things like that, things to that degree. The relationship is one-sided, if not never reciprocated at all, because you can only talk to this person through comments or through their stream chat or through whatever it is that they might not even see it. And so you get to love this person who you never really even get to know, in a sense, or who never really gets to know you, in a sense. And so you almost kind of feel robbed when they don't reciprocate that same love to you when you actually do finally get to meet them. That's probably what drove this person over the edge.
If you ever do.
Yeah, if you ever do.
Yeah. And it's the relationships thereof are as artificial as the mediums they're being carried out through.
Yeah.
If that's understandable. But it's in this sphere as well, the dating apps amplify this issue all the more because, like we mentioned, it's that issue of hypergamy. The women want to attract the Chad and keep the Chad, even if they have to share that with other women. That sounds like a crazy idea, but the greatest men throughout history did have multiple wives and concubines and swarms of women because they were the giga Chads of their time and place. So women were more than happy sharing this very powerful, influential, rich type of man, so long as they got to keep him too and hang around his palace or so on.
It's that idea of
same works in the oh sorry.
Oh no, sorry. It's the idea of that Evolian type of relationship that existed throughout traditional societies in a more fundamental sense than it exists today. But I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, it's no problem. This plays out in the natural world too, where you see lion prides, and it's the alpha male over the pride of lionesses, and you have some straggler men on the side that may challenge the alpha male, but he's alpha for a reason. And it goes on in that course. It's a bit more complex, like Vox Day puts it, with his social sexual hierarchy and the alpha, bravo, delta, gamma, and omega as it goes down in descending order. And they each have their roles in this. And I'd say that incels are probably that border area among the gammas and the omegas. The repulsive aspects of men in the social sexual hierarchy that women tend not to want to associate with at all, and on the cusp of not even being in competition with any other men in the first place and just being ignored by everyone in society. That is the gamma and delta or gamma and omega respectively. So incels are kind of this overlapping area of the two. But in regards to that, saying that women want to keep the Chad, men also want to be the Chad. And, in both cases, that's just not going to happen. There are only a few Chads, and the Chads aren't going to keep some used up whore, for lack of a better term, because the women gave it out on the first date thinking that's going to keep the Chad because that's what the Chad wants. He wants the sex, he gets the sex, he moves on to the next broad. And live by the sword, die by the sword type of mentality.
Yeah.
On the contrary, though, the woman in wanting that will never look at anything less than that Chad that they got. They just think, and this is probably part of the insanity with it, repeating that process over and over again, expecting a different result. They want to try and keep using that methodology to eventually anchor down a perceived Chad, and then they'll live their life happily ever after as a princess. And that just won't happen. And the chances of that happening decrease with each man she goes through. And this is the pickup artist type of explanation of the alpha fucks, beta bucks mentality type of thing. And going on the men's side of it, as you were kind of saying, they want to be the Chad, but they obviously aren't Chads themselves. And they may be well-to-do men as well. They might be Bravos or Deltas in this social sexual hierarchy. But women want to go for the alpha, so they're kind of ignored overall. But because they are competent enough in society, they'll eventually get a girl, but it may not be some pretty ideal virgin like every man would ideally want. And so it's sort of a settling on both ends that no one is really happy with. And there's this implicit distrust because of people's past decisions there too. And it's not just a forgive and forget type of scenario, because if they've behaved one way throughout most of their life, what says they're going to change now all of a sudden as well, especially if some opportunity comes along that they might get that ideal circumstance. That girl who was promiscuous trying to get the Chad is now settled for someone much lower on the social sexual hierarchy, and that guy is very much more distrustful of her, but he can't find a girl anywhere else, so he just settles with her and hopes things work out. It's a very sad situation for most cases because it's so prevalent in society today, especially with the younger generation now, with the average age of losing your virginity decreasing as the years have gone on, and average age being exposed to pornography getting lower as the years go on. And it's incredibly concerning, the mind-altering implications that these trends are having.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like I've exercised all of my notes. Do you have anything else that you would like to talk about?
I probably do, but I don't know what else I could say that might have not already been said. I have a lot of notes on this, as you can tell.
Yeah, you did pretty good research, much more than I did, but we did kind of exercise.
Yeah, there is one.
Go ahead.
Right. I guess I could say that just for my closing statement.
Sure. I mean, I've kind of exercised everything on my note sheet here. If there's anything else you wanted to add, we could just add in our closing statements now.
Yeah. We go.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, before I give my closing remarks, there is a nice little video from Jubilee. I believe they're kind of like a Vox slash
Oh yeah. Okay. I
yeah type of outlet. Yeah, or like a what are they called? The who owns College Humor now? That one website, the
yeah.
one media. I think
College
BuzzFeed.
Humor.
That's
Oh,
what it is.
BuzzFeed. Oh yeah,
They're kind
yeah.
of like a Vox, BuzzFeed type of deal. And they made a video inviting this guy in the LA area who describes himself as an incel, and set up a kind of like how Steven Crowder does his Change My Mind segments. And they invited random people on the street to come out and talk to this guy and ask him questions. And it was actually a very, I don't want to necessarily say heartwarming, but a much more sympathetic video towards incels, because you could see that it's not just all these dysgenic, degenerate coomers or violent extremists, because there is this contention, especially in places like Reddit and Twitter, that view incels as an ideology and not a circumstance or a psychology, because that's very much more what it is. It's not some doctrinated thing, because everything's thought of in political terms now. It's like, oh, put on the label of incel and you have X and Y beliefs, when the fact of the matter is these guys just can't get laid. That's the very simple thing of it, and there's other implications around it, but that's the heart of the issue. And so these random people in Los Angeles came in. You can tell from all different backgrounds, all different mentalities, and was talking to this young man who was a self-described incel, and he, unlike the Nuance Now guy, came off as a very sympathetic, a very likable person, and explained his position and other men's position being incels in a quite holistic way, so that these strangers kind of had a better understanding of what this actually was. And it was a concern in a community to hopefully start to make things better, hopefully to make positive changes, even though what we see online isn't always the case. And it's a kind of carousel of a situation where there are certain incel forums and communities. One of them I found was incel.is, is a blog that is a whole website dedicated to incels, because they've been banned off of places like Reddit in their previous subreddits and forums, so that they can communicate with each other. But it's a constant self-deprecating circle of circumstances. And then you have places like Reddit that have whole subreddits dedicated to making fun of incels, and it's just appreciating them more and saying that, oh, we've all been rejected, stop being like a pity party about it, and things like that. Just many people not understanding the deeper aspects of the issue at hand, and acting as if these people are voluntarily ascribing to this label as if it were an ideology, and they just not getting it. So I definitely recommend that Jubilee video. I think it's called "I'm an Incel, Ask Me Anything." That's what it was.
I see.
And I guess my closing bit would be from Bronze Age Pervert, and he describes a few times throughout his book. Also recommend reading that. How, especially in nature, the males of a species aren't immediately interested in sex. They go out and mark their environment, and I guess for human terms would be making a name for yourself, giving yourself a reputation and respect and status. And in terms of like a wolf, as Bronze Age Pervert described it, is stretching your claws and feeling your power and dominance over your environment. And only then, when you have a true mastery of yourself and the environment in which you live, then you should go out in pursuit of these things, of these relationships, of these experiences with women, and vice versa with men for women. Women should be trying to find their role in society as well as they can in a traditional aspect of things. Because as that Olivia Sun girl put it, I've been referencing her a lot because she had a very good video, is proper love is counterculture, is how she said it. And I thought that was a very succinct way of putting it, because it is very much counterculture to act in a traditional manner, act in a way that is beneficial to you psychologically as a man or a woman, fulfilling your role as you were born as, and not rejecting it or ascribing to these experimental parameters that society has set up for men and women. And that, I think, is probably one of the best takeaways from this all, to avoid the pitfalls of becoming an incel or an e-girl or so on and so forth, and adding on to this degeneration of things.
I like that. The video you mentioned sounds very, very interesting. Yeah, I guess for my closing statement, I would say that, the world in which we live is very hypersensitive, and I don't mean that in the sense that it is emotionally sensitive, which it is, but I mean that people are very sensitive to their social status. They're sensitive towards their perceived status, and they're sensitive towards the interactions that they have with the opposite sex. And so the best piece of advice that I can give as a man, probably to other men, is to focus on yourself. I'm probably going to be talking about this a little bit more in another episode, going forward here, if we ever talk about like work and getting jobs and stuff like that. But definitely the most important thing for a man, I would think, is, like you said, Cody, making a name for yourself. It's getting that reputation behind you. It's creating that substantial thing that will attract the right woman at the right time. So many people, I think, today fall into that desire to want to become romantically involved before all else. And while it's not necessarily a bad thing if you are successful at it, if you are not successful at it, the pursuit can ruin your chances at being successful anywhere else. And so my biggest piece of advice would be not to fall into that trap if you are not successful in it pretty much at the first go. And some people get lucky, some people don't, but definitely.
I think, that the very last thing is make sure you're mature enough for it.
Yeah.
Because that will determine your success.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But without further ado, thank you for listening into this episode of Praxist Table Talks. If you are not sure of where to find us, all of our social media links will be in the description down below. And if you'd like to join us with inquiries to be on the podcast, or to just, discuss various topics with us, over a message board, you can join our Guilded server. The link to that will also be in the description down below. Thank you once again, Cody.
As always.
Once again, my name is Vincent, and thank you for joining us today at the Praxist Table Talks.